The grand hall of the Zentari Empire was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds formed near the top. Its walls were covered with the flags of 12 conquered star systems. Every piece of stone and metal screamed one message: we are powerful, and you are nothing. Daniel Carter walked into this hall with his hands clasped behind his back. He was a man of 53 years with gray hair at his temples and calm brown eyes. He wore a simple black suit with a small earth pin on his chest. Nothing about him looked special. Nothing about him looked dangerous. Behind him walked Admiral Kate Morrison, a woman with short red hair and a face that showed no emotion. She had commanded warships in 3 border conflicts, but today she wore no weapons. Today, they were diplomats. The Zentari had called this meeting a trade discussion. Daniel knew it was a lie. He had known the truth for 3 years now. But he smiled politely as the guards led them forward. At the end of the hall sat High Sovereign Vexilor on a throne made from the bones of his enemies. He was an insectoid creature, 12 feet tall, with 4 arms and eyes like black glass. His voice was like metal scraping against stone. "The human envoy arrives," Vexilor said. "How kind of you to answer our summons." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "High Sovereign, Earth is honored by your invitation." Around the hall, representatives from other species watched from viewing platforms. Daniel recognized the Veth, a gentle species of feather beings who had been enslaved for 200 years. He saw the Korath, massive stone-like creatures forced to work in Zentari mines. He saw dozens of others, all conquered, all watching with sad eyes. They looked at Daniel the way people look at someone walking toward their own grave. Vexilor raised one of his 4 hands. The hall fell silent. "We did not call you here for trade," the High Sovereign said. "We called you here to deliver a message." Daniel nodded. "I suspected as much. Humanity has been observed for 50 years. Your species is young, weak. You have a single home system and a handful of colony ships. Your technology is primitive. Your military is laughable." Vexilor leaned forward on his throne. "And yet you have refused every offer to join our empire as a subject race. We value our independence," Daniel said simply. "Independence is not a choice we offer." Vexilor stood from his throne, and the ground seemed to shake. "The Zentari Empire has 10,000 warships. We have weapons that can crack planets open like eggs. We have soldiers bred for war since the day they were born. Every species in this hall once believed they could stand against us. Now they serve us." The watching aliens shifted nervously. Some looked away from Daniel with pity. "Humanity has 1 week to surrender," Vexilor declared. "You will hand over control of your government, your resources, and your people. You will serve the Empire as workers and soldiers. Any resistance will be met with total destruction." He spread all 4 arms wide. "This is not a negotiation. This is your fate." The words echoed through the massive hall. Guards stomped their feet in approval. The conquered species bowed their heads in silence. Admiral Morrison's jaw tightened. Her hand moved slightly toward her hip, where her weapon would normally be. But Daniel Carter did not move. He did not blink. He simply stood there in his simple black suit, looking up at the massive alien emperor, who had just declared war on his entire species. And then he smiled. It was a small smile. Gentle, almost. The kind of smile a teacher gives when a student finally asks the right question. Vexilor noticed. His black eyes narrowed. "You find this amusing, human?" "No, High Sovereign," Daniel said. His voice was calm and clear. "I find this expected." A murmur ran through the hall. The conquered species looked up with confusion. Even the Zentari guards exchanged glances. "Expected?" Vexilor's voice dropped to a dangerous hiss. "You expected us to threaten your species with extinction, and you smile?" I smile because I have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Daniel took one step forward. And because, before you finalize this declaration, there is something about humanity you should know. Vexillor laughed. It was an ugly sound, like breaking glass. What could you possibly tell me that would matter? I have seen your fleet. I have counted your ships. I have measured your weapons. Humanity is no threat to us. You have seen what we wanted you to see. Daniel said. The hall went quiet. Admiral Morrison stood perfectly still, but something changed in her eyes. Something that looked almost like anticipation. High Sovereign, Daniel continued. 50 years ago, when humanity first detected signals from alien civilizations, we also detected something else. Something hidden in the dark spaces between stars. Something very old. Vexillor's eyes flickered. For just a moment, something that might have been doubt crossed his alien face. We found warnings, Daniel said, left by a civilization that existed millions of years before your empire was born. They called themselves the Architects, and they left us gifts, knowledge, technology. He paused, and detailed files on every empire that would rise in this galaxy, including yours. The silence in the hall was absolute. Not a single being moved. We know about the Centauri, Daniel said softly. We know how you conquer. We know how you enslave. We know what you do to species that surrender. His smile faded and his eyes grew hard. We decided 50 years ago that would never be us. Vexillor's four hands clenched into fists. You are bluffing. I never bluff, High Sovereign. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver device. I came here today not to hear your declaration of war. I came here to give you a choice. But first, I think a demonstration is in order. He pressed the device, and across the galaxy, everything changed. The lights in the grand hall flickered. Screens that had been dark suddenly came to life, showing star maps, fleet positions, and something that made even the oldest Centauri commanders gasp. Where empty space had been, thousands upon thousands of ships appeared. Human ships. Ships with technology that should not exist. High Sovereign, Daniel said, would you like to know what we have been building for the last 50 years? The grand hall had become silent as a tomb. Every eye, every sensor, every consciousness was fixed on the floating screens that now filled the air above them. The screens showed ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships. They hung in the darkness of space like silver ghosts, their designs unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their hulls curved in ways that seemed to bend light itself. Their weapons glowed with energy that sensors could not identify, and they were everywhere. This is impossible, Vexillor whispered. His voice had lost its thunder. Our spies watched your shipyards. Your entire fleet is less than 200 vessels. Those were the ships we let you see, Daniel said. He stood with his hands still clasped behind his back, his voice as calm as ever. We built those ships for you to count, for you to measure, for you to dismiss. Admiral Kate Morrison allowed herself a small smile. She had waited 15 years to see this moment. Let me tell you a story, High Sovereign, Daniel continued. 50 years ago, a young scientist named Sophie Lane was working at a deep space listening station. She was searching for alien signals. What she found was something far older. The screen shifted. They now showed images of ancient structures floating in the void between galaxies. Massive stations, dark and silent, covered in symbols that seemed to move when you looked at them. The Architects, Daniel said. A civilization that existed 12 million years before the first Centauri was born. They mapped the entire galaxy. They predicted which species would rise and which would fall. They watched the patterns of history repeat again and again. Vexillor's claws scraped against his throne. Legends. Children's stories. No, Daniel said. Truth. We found their data caches hidden in 17 locations across the galaxy. They contained records of every major civilization that would exist, including detailed files on the Zentari Empire. He pressed his device again. A new image appeared, a file written in flowing symbols with a translation in human language beside it. The architects wrote this about your empire, Daniel said. They called you the consumers. They predicted you would conquer 12 systems, enslave 47 species, and eventually expand toward a small blue world in the outer arm of the galaxy. The watching aliens leaned forward. The Veth, the Korath, the dozens of enslaved species all listened with growing hope in their eyes. The architects left warnings for species like us, Daniel continued. Young civilizations that might become targets. They told us what would happen if we surrendered. They showed us records of every species the Zentari had conquered. His voice grew harder. They showed us the work camps, the breeding programs, the way you erase cultures and histories until nothing remains but obedient workers. They showed us what you do to species that resist. Vexilla rose from his throne. You dare speak to me of, I dare speak the truth. Daniel cut him off. His calm finally cracked. Just for a moment, and underneath was steel. Humanity looked at those records. We saw what our future would be under Zentari rule. And we made a decision. The screens changed again. Now they showed Earth 50 years ago. Scientists gathered around glowing architect artifacts. Engineers studying technology that seemed like magic. Military officers planning in secret rooms with no windows. Project Echo, Daniel said. Named after the architect warning that echoed across time to reach us. For 50 years, every scientist, every engineer, every soldier who knew the truth worked in complete secrecy. We built our real fleet in shipyards, hidden behind moons and inside asteroids. We developed weapons based on architect designs. We trained crews in simulators that no satellite could detect. General Ryan Ellis appeared on screen, a recording from decades ago. He was a younger man then, with fire in his eyes. We will never bow, the recording said. We will never kneel. We will build in secret, train in shadows, and when they come for us, we will be ready. The recording faded. General Ellis died 3 years ago, Daniel said quietly. He never got to see this day, but his work lives on. Humanity is not the weak, primitive species you believed us to be. That was a mask, a costume we wore while we prepared. Vex RS guards shifted nervously. Their commanders were speaking rapidly into communication devices. Reports were coming in from across the Empire, and none of them were good. Your ships, one commander said to the High Sovereign, his voice shaking. Our entire border fleet is surrounded. Ships appeared from nowhere. They have weapons locked on every one of our vessels. Cloaking technology, Admiral Morrison said, speaking for the first time. Architect design. Your sensors never had a chance. Vexthiel had turned his black eyes back to Daniel. For the first time, the High Sovereign looked uncertain. Even with advanced ships, you cannot match our numbers. We have 10,000 warships. You did, Daniel agreed. The 4 today. But you see, High Sovereign, we did not just prepare ourselves. We also made friends. The screens changed one more time. Now they showed other worlds. Veth, homeworld. Korath, mining colonies. Dozens of planets across the 12 conquered systems. On each world, symbols were appearing in the sky. Human symbols. Alliance symbols. For 30 years, we have been in contact with resistance movements across your empire, Daniel said. We supplied them with weapons. We trained their fighters. We promised them that when the day came, they would not fight alone. The Veth representative on the viewing platform stood up suddenly. His feathers spread wide, as he raised his hand in a gesture of salute toward Daniel. One by one, other conquered species did the same. The Korath, the Nelith, the small blue beings from the Seventh System. They rose and they saluted. The Free People's Coalition, Daniel announced. 12 species, 800 worlds, 2 million soldiers who have been waiting in the shadows for this very moment. Vexillor stumbled backward. His four hands gripped his throne for support. You have not declared war on humanity, Daniel said. You have declared war on an alliance that spanned your entire empire. An alliance that is ready. An alliance that has been ready for years. He stepped forward, and his voice rang through the hall. Now, High Sovereign, would you like to discuss terms? Or would you prefer to learn what architect weapons can do to a throne world? The throne room of the Zentari Empire had seen many things over the centuries. It had witnessed the surrender of proud nations. It had echoed with the screams of defeated enemies. It had celebrated countless victories. It had never seen this. High Sovereign Vexillor stood frozen as reports flooded in from every corner of his empire. His commanders spoke over each other in panicked voices. His guards no longer looked confident. His throne, built from the bones of his enemies, suddenly seemed very small. Confirm those numbers, one admiral shouted into his communicator. That cannot be correct. Numbers confirmed, came the reply. 53,000 enemy vessels detected across all sectors. They appeared simultaneously. No warning, no signals. They were simply there. Daniel Carter watched the chaos with patient eyes. Beside him, Admiral Kate Morrison stood with her arms crossed, a small smile on her lips. Your border fleet has been completely surrounded, another commander reported to Vexillor. The enemy ships have not fired, but their weapons are charged and locked. They are waiting. Waiting for what? Vexillor demanded. For your decision, Daniel answered calmly. The High Sovereign turned on him with fury in his black eyes. You come into my hall. You threaten my empire. You think you have won something here, human? I have won nothing yet, Daniel said. Neither have you. That is the point. Right now, at this very moment, no one has died. No cities have burned. No children have lost their parents. We stand at a crossroads, High Sovereign. The path we choose next will decide the fate of billions. Pretty words from a species that just revealed a hidden army. An army that is not attacked, Daniel pointed out. An army that is waiting. Vexillor's S-claws dug into the stone floor. What do you want, human? Tribute? Territory? Name your price for peace. Peace cannot be bought, Daniel said. Only earned. He raised his hand, and the floating screens shifted again. Now they showed a live feed from space. A massive human warship hung in the darkness, its hull gleaming with strange light. The name on its side read Constellation. This is Commander Ben Harris aboard the Constellation, a voice said through the hall speakers. All coalition forces are in position, awaiting orders. Hold position, Commander, Admiral Morrison replied. Negotiations are ongoing. Understood, Admiral. Standing by. The feed remained live. Every being in the hall could see the massive fleet that surrounded the Zentari forces. Ships from a dozen different species flew alongside human vessels. Former slaves and human soldiers working together. You built all of this in secret, Vexillor said slowly. For 50 years, you pretended to be weak while building an empire of your own. No, Daniel said firmly. We built an alliance. There is a difference. What difference? You have ships. You have weapons. You have soldiers. That is an empire. Daniel shook his head. He walked toward the viewing platforms where the alien representatives still stood with their hands raised in salute. Look at them, he said, gesturing to the Veth, the Korath, and all the others. Under your rule, they are slaves. Under ours, they are partners. We did not conquer these species. We asked them to join us. We shared our technology freely. We trained their soldiers and let them command their own forces. Every species in the coalition has an equal voice. Lies, Vexler spat. No empire shares power willingly. Then we are not an empire. A shimmer of light appeared in the center of the hall. When it faded, a new figure stood there. He was a human man with dark hair and kind eyes, wearing a simple gray uniform. High Sovereign, Daniel said. Allow me to introduce Ambassador Chris Morgan, elected leader of the Free People's Coalition. Chris Morgan bowed respectfully. High Sovereign Vexler, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Teleportation technology, Vexler whispered. That is not possible. The energy requirements alone. Architect design, Chris said simply. They solve problems we did not even know existed. He walked to stand beside Daniel, then turned to face the viewing platforms. My friends, he called out, for decades you have waited in chains. You have watched your family suffer. You have dreamed of freedom while pretending to be loyal subjects. Today, that pretending ends. The Veth representative stepped forward. Her name was Sentinel Prime Kira, and tears streamed down her feathered face. Is it true? She asked, her voice breaking. Is it finally time? It is time, Chris confirmed. The coalition stands ready. Across every conquered world, our forces are in position. But we will not fire the first shot. That choice belongs to the High Sovereign. All eyes turned back to Vexler. The ruler of 12 star systems looked at the screen showing his surrounded fleet. He looked at the alien species who had been his slaves for centuries. He looked at the two human men who stood before him without fear. You could have attacked without warning, he said slowly. Your fleet appeared everywhere at once. You could have destroyed us before we knew what was happening. Yes, Daniel agreed. Why did you not? Daniel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Because we read all the architect files, High Sovereign. Not just the ones about you. We read about 1,000 civilizations that rose and fell across millions of years. We saw the pattern. We saw how every cycle of conquest leads to another cycle of war, forever and ever, until everyone is ash. He looked up at the flags of conquered systems that hung on the walls. We decided to break the pattern. We built our army not to conquer, but to offer a choice. War or peace. Slavery or freedom. The old way or a new one. Vexler stared at him for a long moment. And if I choose war? If I refuse your terms? Daniel's eyes were steady. Then we will do what we must. But we would rather not. The choice, High Sovereign, is yours. The silence in the grand hall stretched on. High Sovereign Vexler stood before his throne, surrounded by advisors who had no advice to give. For the first time in 300 years of rule, the master of 12 star systems did not know what to do. Daniel Carter waited. He was very good at waiting. Humanity had waited 50 years for this moment. A few more minutes meant nothing. Your terms, Vexler finally said. His voice was quiet, almost tired. You spoke of terms. What do you demand? Not demands, Daniel replied. Requests. There is a difference. Speak them. Daniel nodded. He had practiced these words 1,000 times in his mind. He had dreamed of saying them for 15 years. First, the immediate release of all enslaved peoples. Every species under Zentari control must be freed. The chains come off. The work camps close. The breeding programs end. Vexler's claws tightened. You asked me to destroy our entire economy. I asked you to stop building your economy on the suffering of others. Second, the dismantling of your military command structure. No single leader can control 10,000 warships. The fleet must be divided among the free peoples, shared equally, with human advisors to ensure fairness. You want to break apart our power. I want to ensure you cannot threaten anyone again. At least, not alone. The Zentari Emperor made a sound like grinding metal. And third? Daniel stepped closer. His voice remained calm, but there was warmth in it now. Third, and most important, we want you to join us. Not as conquerors. Not as rulers. As equals. Vexler stared at him. What? The Free People's Coalition is not a human empire with alien servants. It is a partnership of equals. Every member species has one voice, one vote. We make decisions together. We share resources. We defend each other. You want the Zentari to sit beside our former slaves? To vote alongside creatures we conquered? Yes. Ambassador Chris Morgan stepped forward. High Sovereign, I understand this is difficult. Your species has ruled through strength for thousands of years. But strength built on conquest always crumbles. The architects proved that. Every empire in their files eventually fell, destroyed by the enemies they created. We offer something different, Daniel added. A strength built on cooperation. A future where no species needs to fear its neighbors because all neighbors are allies. Vexler turned away. He walked slowly back to his throne and stared at it for a long moment. The bones that formed it had once belonged to a rival emperor. He had killed that emperor himself, 200 years ago. My entire civilization, he said quietly, is built on conquest. It is who we are. It is all we have ever known. Then perhaps it is time to learn something new. The words came not from Daniel, but from the viewing platform. Sentinel Prime Kira of the Veth had spoken. She walked down from the platform, her feathers rustling with each step. The guards moved to stop her, but Vexler raised a hand. Let her approach. Kira stopped a few feet from the High Sovereign. She was small compared to him, fragile. For 200 years, her species had been slaves. I should hate you, she said. Your soldiers killed my grandfather. Your work camps broke my mother's health. Your laws told me I was less than nothing. Vexler said nothing. But the humans taught us something, Kira continued. They taught us that hate is a chain, too. It binds the one who hates just as tightly as the one who is hated. She reached out and touched one of Vexler's massive claws. The Emperor flinched as if burned. I do not want revenge, Kira said softly. I want my children to grow up free. I want my people to choose their own future. I want peace. Around the hall, other freed species began to speak. The Korath representative called out for an end to the mining camps. The Nelith asked for their holy sites to be returned. One by one, they spoke not of vengeance, but of healing. Vexler listened to all of them. His black eyes moved from face to face, species to species. These were the creatures he had conquered, the beings he had considered inferior. And now they stood before him, offering forgiveness he had never asked for. Why? He finally asked Daniel. Why teach them mercy? They had every right to demand blood. Because mercy is stronger than blood, Daniel replied. Mercy breaks the cycle. Mercy builds something that lasts. The communication devices around the hall crackled. A new voice spoke, one of the Zentari War admirals. High Sovereign, we have a situation. The worker caste on the homeworld is rising. They have taken control of the power stations. They are not fighting. They are simply refusing to work. Another voice. Same report from the agricultural colonies. The enslaved species have stopped all production. They say they are waiting for your decision. And another. The military shipyards have been surrounded by coalition forces. Our workers there have walked off their stations. Everything has stopped. Vexler closed his eyes. You did not just build an army, he said to Daniel. You built a revolution, one that does not need to fire a single shot. We build hope, Daniel replied. Something far more powerful. The High Sovereign was quiet for a very long time. When he opened his eyes again, something had changed in them. The arrogance was gone. The cruelty was faded. What remained looked almost like relief. I accept your terms, he said. The hall erupted. The freed species cheered. The coalition representatives embraced each other. Even some of the Centauri guards lowered their weapons and looked around in confusion. Daniel Carter allowed himself a small smile. 50 years of preparation. 50 years of secrets and sacrifices. And now, in one moment, everything had changed. Welcome to the coalition, High Sovereign, he said. Now the real work begins. 3 months had passed as the day the Centauri Empire fell without a single shot fired. Daniel Carter stood on a balcony high above the new coalition capital city. The city had no name yet. It was built on a neutral world that had never belonged to any species, a fresh start for everyone. Below him, buildings rose in 100 different styles. Centauri architecture stood beside Veth gardens. Korath stone towers shadowed human glass structures. It was messy and beautiful and alive. They are calling you the Liberator, Admiral Kate Morrison said, joining him on the balcony. Every newsfeed in 12 systems uses that word. Daniel shook his head. I do not deserve that title. I just delivered the message. The real heroes are the ones who kept the secret for 50 years. The scientists who died before seeing their work completed. The soldiers who trained for wars they hoped would never come. Speaking of which, Kate said, the ceremony is about to begin. They are waiting for you. The ceremony was held in the central plaza of the new city. Thousands had gathered. Humans stood beside aliens of every shape and size. Centauri workers, newly freed, mingled with the species they had once enslaved. Children played together, not knowing or caring about the differences between them. On a raised platform, a very old woman sat in a floating chair. Her hair was white as snow, and her hand shook slightly. But her eyes were sharp and bright. Dr. Sophie Lane, the woman who had discovered the architect's signals 50 years ago, had lived long enough to see her work bear fruit. Daniel walked onto the platform and stood beside her. Dr. Lane, he said into the microphone, his voice carrying across the plaza, 50 years ago, you found a warning in the darkness of space. You could have ignored it. You could have decided it was too big a problem for one person to solve. Instead, you dedicated your entire life to preparing humanity for this moment. The crowd fell silent. You trained generations of scientists. You built the foundation of Project Echo. You kept the secret when keeping it meant sacrificing everything else. Your fame, your family, your normal life. Sophie smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. I only did what anyone would do, she said, her voice thin but steady. I saw the future they planned for us, and I refused to accept it. Daniel placed a medal around her neck. It was simple gold, stamped with the emblem of the coalition, a circle of hands, each from a different species, joined together. On behalf of humanity and all the free peoples of this galaxy, Daniel said, we thank you. The crowd erupted in applause. Humans cheered. Aliens made sounds of joy in 100 different ways. Sophie Lane raised one shaking hand in acknowledgement, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Later that day, after the speeches and celebrations, Daniel slipped away from the crowds. He took a small ship to the moon where the architect data vault was hidden. Only a handful of people knew this place existed. Only 3 had the codes to enter. Kate Morrison accompanied him. They walked together through ancient corridors that glowed with soft blue light. The walls were covered in symbols that humanity still did not fully understand. They had learned to use the technology, but the deeper meanings remained mysterious. At the center of the vault stood a massive crystal, pulsing with energy. This was where all the architect knowledge was stored. Every warning, every design, every record of civilizations long dead. Daniel approached the crystal. He had visited it many times over the past 15 years. But today, something was different. A new light pulsed within the crystal, a pattern he had never seen before. "What is that?" Kate asked. "I do not know." Daniel reached out and touched the crystal. The vault came alive. Holographic images filled the air around them. Stars and galaxies swam in the darkness. And then, for the first time in 12 million years, a voice spoke. It was not a recording. It was a message that had been waiting, locked behind barriers that would only open when certain conditions were met. "You have passed the test," the voice said. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It simply was. "We are the architects. We left our warnings for the young species of this galaxy, but we also left a test. Many found our technology. Many used it for conquest. They repeated the same patterns that destroyed us." Daniel and Kate stood frozen, barely breathing. "But you chose differently," the voice continued. "You built weapons, but did not fire them. You gained power, but offered mercy. You could have become the new masters of this galaxy. Instead, you became its partners." The holographic display shifted. Now it showed a map of the universe, stretching far beyond the local galaxy. At the edge, in the darkness between galaxies, a point of light glowed. "We are not dead," the voice said. "We retreated to a place beyond reach, waiting to see if any species would break the cycle. You have proven that wisdom is possible. You have earned the right to know the truth." The point of light expanded, showing structures that defied imagination. Cities that orbited black holes. Ships that sailed between galaxies. A civilization that had survived 12 million years by choosing isolation over dominance. "When you are ready," the voice said, "we will welcome you. But take your time. Build your peace. Heal your wounds. We have waited millions of years. We can wait a little longer." The message ended. The vault returned to its gentle blue glow. Daniel and Kate stood in silence for a long moment. "There are more of them," Kate finally said. "Out there, waiting." Daniel nodded slowly. His mind was racing with possibilities he could barely grasp. But one thing was clear. The story was not over. It was just beginning. He turned to Kate with the same small smile he had worn in the Grand Hall 3 months ago. "Well, Admiral," he said, "it looks like we have a new mission." Kate laughed. A sound of pure joy. "I knew retirement was too much to hope for." They walked out of the vault together, into the light of stars that suddenly seemed full of promise. Behind them, the architect crystal pulsed gently, keeping its secrets until the galaxy was ready to learn them. And far away, on the new capital world, humans and aliens worked side by side, building something that had never existed before. Not an empire, not a conquest, but a family of species, bound together by choice rather than chains. The Zentari Empire had declared war, expecting easy victory. Instead, they had found something they never expected, a species that fought hardest not to destroy, but to save. That was humanity's secret. Not their technology, not their hidden fleet, not even the architect gifts. Their secret was simple. They believed that mercy was stronger than power, that unity was greater than conquest, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to choose hope. And now, with the stars themselves open before them, they were ready to prove it.